are strong forces. And anything that looks like it might interfere with that will be regarded with fear and loathing. All right? And it plays into one of these cognitive barriers, loss aversion, which comes out of behavioral economics. The idea is people faced with a choice between what they have and what they could have if they change are much more concerned about what they might lose through the change than what they might gain through it. So people want to avert loss more than they want to have gain. And the same thing is true when you're talking about arrests and convictions. Don't want to get in the way of that. Police, as I was saying a few minutes ago, have a very strong culture. It is not a mistake to call it a separate culture. Try going into a so-called police bar after hours and see if you're welcome. It's not that people are mean or bad, it's theirs, right? If you haven't carried the gun and the badge and worn the uniform and had those responsibilities, buddy, you have no idea. I always think of Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. So don't talk to us about what we ought to do. You have no idea. And I've heard this. I've had this said to me I don't know how many times. I do a lot of police training, right? This is a common feeling. That makes change very, very difficult, especially when it's seen to come from the outside. All right? Prosecutors, not quite so much because they have a separate identity as attorneys, members of the bar, or something like that, but they experience some of this too. So lots and lots here that slows change down and stops it. Cognitive barriers and institutional or political barriers. Happy to return to any of that when we get to questions. So, if that's what causes the resistance, that's what I found. If that's what causes the resistance, 2 questions. I'll take them out of order, all right? We'll see why. First is, of course, how do you break through it? The second is, if you could break through it, what would you want? What changes would you want? But that's easier, the change we would want. So we'll take that first, all right? What change would we want? All we have to do is follow the science where there's the strongest consensus, okay? And the things I picked out here have a very strong consensus. There are other things that could change that, people differ on, or there's differing study results and so forth, but this stuff is pretty strongly accepted. Sequential lineups, move to them from simultaneous lineups. Blind the lineups. Record interrogations from front to back, not just that last part. Ban lies about scientific testing. Change the forensic focus. This will take years, but it's got to be done. You've got to move to a point where you're doing forensics based on data and strict scientific analysis and not experience that differs from examiner to examiner, and you have no consistent standards. And you get it right most of the time, but not all the time. Right? That's not good enough. Not good enough. You want to put safeguards against human biases into the laboratories. You want to do efficiency testing, and some of that so-called science, you just have to get rid of it. I mentioned forensic odontology test, name it, right? But there are other things too. We can talk more about that. So this is the easy part. What would you do? How about the hard part? How do you break through it? If those forces of cognitive barriers, if those institutional barriers are so strong, how do you break through? But I think understanding them, we can break through. Okay? Here's how. How do you make it happen? Number 1, change the focus. The focus of what we'll call the innocence movement has to change. It has to change to be all on the future and away from the past. With one important caveat there, conviction integrity units. Right? So, future, not past. Okay? Up to this point, for good reasons, we have had an innocence movement that has mostly been focused on cases of wrongful conviction. There are a lot of them out there. There's still some out there. I mean, 11 more in this past 13 months. Right? So that has to continue, but the focus of the effort really has to be, how can we stop making mistakes and be better? Right? That will make a big difference to the people who are strongly affected by cognitive dissonance. Right? Because we're not asking them, we're not blaming them, we're not telling them this is your fault, apologize and tell us what you're going to do different. We're saying, how can we change things so it works and we don't have these problems going forward? My experience with people in law enforcement, whether we're talking about police or talking about prosecutors, they want things to work the best they can. But change is hard for all the reasons I was just saying. Right? If we put the focus on the future, more of them will get interested. It won't be so much about, well, you did wrong or your office did wrong. It will be about what we can do to fix it. Okay? Now, with one caveat, you got to have conviction integrity units. Okay? You have to have some kind of built-in institutional device that will serve the function of looking at wrongful convictions or cases in which there may be wrongful convictions. Now, if you've worked any in prisons, as I have, you will find many people telling you they're innocent. And I think it's a fair bet, not all of them are. All right? So you need some way to screen these things. You don't take every claim, but there are cases that, as you know, if you've been involved in this, if you've been studying it, some rise to the top and scream, this was a mistake. There has to be an institutional mechanism for addressing those things. And the most promising model at this point is something I'll call conviction integrity units. These are units within a prosecutor's office. Just like the homicide unit, the major thefts unit, whatever else you got, this unit has a job, and the attorneys in it are dedicated to looking at old cases that might have gone wrong. Right? This idea was first tried in Dallas DA's office, when they got a very big surprise to the power structure in Dallas, elected the first African-American DA in the history of Texas, let alone in Dallas. And he came in, he's the broom, he's going to clean it out. Dallas, by itself, had more wrongful convictions than all but a few states. Okay? By itself. Right? Dallas was a source of these things in Texas, which is pretty much a source itself. So he came in, he's going to make changes. This is one of the first things he did. He set up a conviction integrity unit, several lawyers, and they joined forces with the Texas Innocence Project to bring the cases in and screen them. So he's got law students and undergraduates and people involved in the innocence movement, helping them, bringing them the cases that are the best candidates that might have had something gone wrong in them. And in the time that they've been doing this in Dallas, they have uncovered some wrongful convictions. They have also confirmed some convictions. And they've even uncovered a few people where there had not been adequate testing and things like that in the past, people they didn't even know about who had actually committed crimes. All right? It's a powerful device. The next one went up in Houston. There's now one in Brooklyn. There's now one in the Manhattan DA's office. I don't know if the Cook County State's Attorney has one or not, but this is an increasing thing, and it should go in every prosecutor's office. Now, it's not a perfect solution because it's inside, right? You'd much rather have an independent body if you could choose. But this is good because you can set it up like that, you can get rolling, you can get help with it, and at least it allows us then to put the focus on the future. Number two, police and prosecutors must lead us in this. Police and prosecutors have to lead the changes. Right? Why do I say that? This comes from many, many years of my own experience training law enforcement, both police and prosecutors. If they hear it from me, an academic with some experience in the trenches years ago, but I'm not one of them, it's very easy to discount me and what I say. Very easy indeed. And I'll get an audience, maybe a third will pay attention, lots of them like this, and some of them will just turn around, get up, and leave. All right? On the other hand, my friend Bob, who did 20 years with the DC Metro Police and was the police chief then in 2 different departments and now goes around the country consulting with police departments, if he says something, it could be the same thing that came out of my mouth, they listen. All right? That's that police culture thing. These police and prosecutors who have tried this stuff, and there are increasing numbers, still small but increasing number, they have to be the leaders. They have to be the leaders because they will get the attention that I would never get. Right? They will get people convinced. Example, it has been the law of the state of Minnesota for almost 20 years that all interrogations must be recorded. That was done in 1994. So you have police departments in a very populous state with big cities that have loads of experience doing this. And who turn out, which people turn out to be the biggest boosters of recording interrogations? It's police. It's prosecutors, because they've had the experience, they know it works for them. One of the best quotes I came across in doing my research, talking to people, a police captain from some of the Twin Cities, I forget if it was St. Paul or Minneapolis, I know there's a difference. Police captain who said, recording interrogations was the best reform that was ever shoved down our throats. They didn't want to do it. They felt imposed upon by the outside. They didn't like it, but it has worked for them. Their cases go more smoothly. They spend less time in court, for God's sake. Cases resolve in pleas of guilty much more easily. All those questions about whether the person got Miranda rights, were they correct, it's all on tape. Any question of abuse or high-handedness